Thank you. Okay, I think we're just about ready to begin here. So, hello everyone and welcome to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thank you for joining us for today's event addressing ableism in the arts through access as a creative practice, which is part of the Digital Intimacies pop-up expo and workshops. To help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube live from Fourth Space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. At Fourth Space, we work with our university community to mobilize knowledge by co-creating daily activities to examine research questions and projects in development here. We are running this event as a live stream meeting, so we welcome your comments and questions with a raised hand or via the chat if you're here by Zoom. For those of you in the space, if you'd like to participate, just let us know by raising a hand and we'll get this microphone to you. With that, it's my pleasure to hand it over to your presenter, Jessie, as well as T, who will introduce Jessie.
Okay, thank you very much. And by the way, that was Jessie's work in the background during the introduction. And it's this beautiful piece. It's called Chipping Away at the Bitterness, and they're rust-dyed textiles. It's found textile. So I have the pleasure today of introducing Jessie Muffin-Stanton, who will be talking about addressing ableism in the arts through access as a creative practice. Jessie is an artist and researcher, currently completing a PhD at Concordia University in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, and her practice weaves around textiles, sound design, and creative writing to explore disability and cultural participation. All right, thanks, Jessie.
Great, thanks, T. Can you hear me okay, everyone? Yeah. Thank you, Doug. Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. All right, great. Well, welcome. Hi, I'm Jessie. Oh, in the middle. I don't do this often, can you tell? How's that? In the middle? Okay, cool. Hi, okay, well, welcome. Thank you all for coming. So today we're gonna be addressing ableism and accessibility through creative practice. My name's Jessie. I'm a white woman with fair, freckly skin and red hair, curly bangs, wearing a black t-shirt. And what I just did was self-describe myself, which is a practice of giving some sort of visual context for blind and low vision audience members. And just one of the little techniques we're going to talk about today. So before I kind of jump into this, I want to contextualize myself a bit. So if you look on the screen, this is the photo of me, my brother and sister at like a New Year's party, kind of blurry, hanging around. So I identify as someone who's neurodivergent and has multiple psychosocial disabilities, but this is kind of an identity that I have been exploring more as I get older and more into like disability, but my kind of primary introduction to disability was through my brother who has an intellectual disability. So my experience I've had is quite privileged, and I think it's really important to like center this because, or identify this because disability is such like a vast topic and covers so much range of experiences. So the way I kind of got thinking about accessibility in art was I was with my brother at Storm King, I don't know, in New York. It's a sculpture garden. This is the photo of him under the three-legged Buddha by Zhang Han. And we were going through this sculpture garden and my brother kept asking me like, what is this? Who is that? Why is that man naked? Like all these questions of engaging with the work because the didactic labels and texts weren't accessible for him to read. And so this kind of moment of exploring really got me thinking of like, how do we make art more accessible to folks and kind of how can we address these things that are oftentimes considered as neutral, but aren't because they exclude many bodies and minds. So just a brief plan today. I'm going to give some context to access. I'm going to run through access as a creative practice and how we as artists and academics and just general folks can integrate this. Give some tips and resources, and then we're going to do a brief audio description activity together. So what does accessibility mean? It's a word that is really thrown around a lot, I think, lately, and it can be very vague. On the right is a photo of the artist and activist Emily Barker wearing a shirt that she designed that says accessibility is utopia. In utopia, no one thing is greater than another. And I really love this shirt because it kind of is specifically vague in a way. Like, it's really, I thought it was a funny kind of way to start of how do we think about accessibility? What does it mean? But I did also want to ask the audience what your kind of understandings of accessibility would be. You can just like shout out words or things that you might see as access, accessibility measures. Inclusion, nice. 5, 4, 3. Yeah, totally. Thank you. I just wanted to do that to kind of see, because I feel like sometimes it can be really difficult to be like, what is accessibility and what do we mean when we're talking about accessibility? So you might think of some of these things when you hear the word accessibility. We have parking spots that are reserved for disabled folks. You have closed captionings, the classic disability logo, ASL in the top, or ramps, or maybe we think of accommodations like for final exams. And so measures of accessibility are most commonly seen or understood in terms of architectural features, such as ramps. And a lot of the time we see accessibility in terms of code compliance. So this sort of access is often called Americans with Disability Acts, like ADA access, or you could say the CDA for Canada. And it's because these things of access are kind of part of the built environment, because they're changes that are made that added on. Like we add ramps, we add closed captioning. We're changing the built environment. And so while this access is great and it's a great step, it doesn't really address the sort of neutral space or it doesn't really address the fact that the built environment is not a neutral space, but is instead inseparable from social attitudes, biases, and discriminatory systems. And we often think about access in terms of policy change, which while I think is really important, obviously, policy doesn't serve everyone, and policy is also kind of maintaining a very specific neoliberal regime. And this regime, while also ableist, is the same kind of logics that promote white supremacy and heteronormativity in these places that really make us feel welcome or not welcome in the space. So I guess I kind of answered my own question, but the problem with this is that you end up getting things like this. And so on the photo on the left, you can see there's a ramp that you could never actually access the building. The photo on the right is actually taken right before this presentation at the bathroom. That's a disability sign. It's a disabled washroom, but there's no door. There's no automatic button for the door. So that would be incredibly hard for a wheelchair user to open by themselves. Some other examples of fails you see are these disability crosswalks that have a median built in, or a grab bar that is code compliant, but that grab bar is so far away from the toilet, it's not going to serve anyone in need. And so with this type of access, this ADA access, it's often that the user, the disabled person, is really erased from the idea of accessibility in favor of these, checklists, like, oh, we added a ramp, like we're accessible, code compliance. And this also really echoes what's known as the medical model of disability, which kind of starts from this idea that the world, or the idea that like able-bodiedness is kind of the norm, and that disability is a deviation, when in fact, disability is one of the most natural things in the world and has existed since the beginning of humanity. And it was really only with the Industrial Revolution and kind of the idea of productivity becoming central that disabilities, we kind of know it as this demonized or separate thing, has been the prominent norm. So if access is more than just the adding a grab bar or a ramp, what is it? So Bess William kind of defines access as striving for a more inclusive society with greater opportunities for social and political participation. And so to unpack this further, I think I want to address what disability is, or how I've kind of conceptualized disability. So access is obviously very related to disability, but disability is a fluent identity and structure that manifests in relation to these very specific socio-political conditions of a given time and also positionality. Not something that can really be, boiled down to a checklist. And it's interesting because then we end up getting these checklists that are more often serve as kind of a feature of modernity or of feel-good inclusion, instead of actually serving people. And so I think when I think about access, I really try to think of it in relation to disability, and then also in relation to disability futurity. As you can see, there's this flaming graphic that I made yesterday, blue flames of disability futurity. And so this is a term that I learned from Alison Kafer. And it calls attention to the ways that we think of disability. How are we to imagine disabled futures, or what do we imagine a world that we welcome disability? Because often when we think about the future, it's in terms of the able body and the able mind, like we have all the biohacking, like, oh, we can be bionic beings. Like, how do we solve, like, erase disability as opposed to create a world where disability is welcomed? So that's kind of my intro into access and disability. And so now what does this have to do with art? Or like, how can we kind of service this in art? Because it's honestly not the first place that it's usually thought of. Like, and I've found this a lot in writing grant applications and writing I guess, I'll just stick with grant applications. But we don't think of this as high on the priority list. It's like, oh, like, what is access in art? And like, there are also many things that I understand getting into a building or getting funding. There's so many emergent or very immediate needs that kind of disabled people face that I think sometimes these other things are listed as less important. But, went too far. So the first off is that disabled artists are very marginalized. Grant structures are time-consuming and intellectually strenuous, so it can be hard to get funding. The disability payment in Canada is also not very high at all, so it can be hard to have time to like focus on your work. My work personally, I work with intellectual disability, which is a subsection of disability that is most often marginalized or not kind of thought of in terms of access. Particularly intellectually disabled artists aren't considered to have this like creative capacity to be a serious artist. It's often framed as like art therapy or these community initiatives that really infantilize disabled artists and disabled people. But also, it's important because, I keep going forward. Art as a cultural institution is, I think, really important for where we figure out norms and push our boundaries further of what we do in society. Ideas play out. It's the artist Maria Chavez says that artists have the job of working the neuroplasticity of the world, which I think is a really beautiful way of thinking about it. Like, art is something that really pushes the boundaries of how we understand our relationality between one another and to the world. And so this is why I'm really passionate about moving access into art in a more substantial way than just thinking about it in terms of like adding a ramp to a building or adding closed captions. So this brings me to disability as method and access as a creative practice, which can serve working together to create fun AF spaces that anticipate a range of access needs. So I'll first, the term disability is method, which I pull from my supervisor, Arshli Dakumaji. And disability is method kind of highlights this creative knowledge that emerges from embodiments of disability and attuning to disabled being in the world. Because this gives us an opportunity to kind of critically examine these naturalized hierarchies in our built environment. Like, for example, I would have honestly not really thought about the inaccessibility of didactic text had I not been with my brother at that art gallery and had all these conversations with him. And so thinking about the sort of disability as method and how we can really center the embodied experience of disability in our work leads me to access as a creative practice. And so that is just thinking about access not as an add-on feature, but also as a faucet of creativity, something that can be experimental, not something that you can kind of just, look in a book and be like, this is my problem, this is my solution, because disability doesn't cohere to that. And when we get stuck in these logics, it kind of further ends up erasing people. So I'm going to show you some examples of some work that I think kind of thinks about access in a creative way. This first one is The Foot Knows the Foot When It Touches the Earth by Jennifer Justice. This was part of an exhibition in the Bay Area called Recoding Cryptech that ran in 2020, right before the pandemic. And this is an example of kind of thinking about access in a way that we can really build it into art as an integral feature. And the artist does this by exploring multimodality within the work. So there's not just one singular way to engage in it. So as you can see, it's kind of made up of these three blocks of wooden pallets on top. And I'm just going to read kind of sections from the didactic text on the left, but I know it's a little bit blurry, so if you can't, I apologize. But the foot knows the foot when it touches the earth emerged as response to the 2017 California wildfires. A network of haptic platforms fed by tactile transducers allows 3D model sculptures to transmit sound and vibration, animating our collective carbon footprint. 3D imprints of animal tracks help illustrate key species' roles in the story of climate change. The beat of clogs dancing invokes a human stampede that amplify, both literally and figuratively, the impact of human encroachment on healthy ecosystems. So accessibility considerations inform the aesthetic choices of the installation, inviting visitors to examine the relationship of disability, body, and place. And so in the instructions, it's please touch, feel this haptic experience. And what I really like about this piece and this exhibition as a whole is that it does an excellent job at kind of combining traditional mediums of art making in a very analog way with 3D tech. And that is something, as in T's talk earlier, Marie was talking about the tech cryptoscience by Amy Hamry and Kelly Fritsch. But it's this, I think we're in a very exciting time for thinking about access and disability in that there's such a range of technology that is becoming more accessible to artists and also more accessible to just being used in the way. So yeah, this is just kind of one example of ways that you can do access as a creative practice through multimodality. Another one, this is a video from Sin's Invalid, which is a kind of anti-racist disability collective that works in the Bay Area also, I believe, but I'll see if this plays. I don't know if I have sound access. Oh, my computer. Oh yeah, I don't know if I shared my sound. Do I need to reshare? Oh, share computer sound. Oh yeah, wait, I'm gonna go back to, sorry y'all, one sec. Do I need to turn my computer on?
No, I could just stop the share from us. There, your sounds on.
Sure sound.
Portion of the screen. All right.
Is that my mic? The thunder is actually making a really funny background.
It's very cozy.
Open up. Make room. Let the circle grow. From the shadows steps a man of Tuskegee, syphilis raging untreated through his veins, gone blind, lame, and speechless, while white doctors took notes. But here he speaks with a voice like a drum. At the light's edge, a girl with no face, who lived 10 years locked in a room, holds the hand of an old man with no relatives and blue numbers tattooed on his arm. Trace the lines in the maps of our bodies. They run like furrows, side by side. They move like rivers, enter each other, make tributaries and forks. Make room for the children raised on locked wards under a flickering fluorescent light, the shocked and injected, the measured and displayed, tormented, fondled, drugged, called defective. Their small, blunt faces look out from sterile hallways, gray buildings, medical case files, toward this fire that we become. They come wheeling and hobbling over thick tree roots to sit by the flames, cry out in childish voices for water, for hands to hold, for us to listen as they give themselves new names. We unwrap our tongues. We bind our stories. We choose to be naked. We show our markings. We lick our fingers. We stroke our bellies. We laugh at midnight. We change the ending. We begin and begin again.
All right, oh, is this on? I think so, yeah. Wow, that was perfect with the thunder in the background. Yeah, so this piece is Listen Speak by Aurora Levin Morales. And I don't know if you could pick up on it, but then throughout the kind of speech, the performer was also audioly describing the motions, the woman with no face kind of back. And so, yeah, this is another way that, just another example of access being used in a creative way to kind of set this environment. This is so funny. All right. Next one. Okay, there we go. All right, so it's also access is not always going to be at the forefront of a work in a way that it's kind of coming in through the art. art piece, that might not be something that happens. But access as a curatorial measure is also a really great way that you can kind of involve access in a deeper way, and it does still end up changing the artwork. And so this is, I'm going to show you an example from AIMLab. This was an exhibition that we collaborated on, curated by Roy Sade. It was Air, River, Sea, Soil, A History of an Exploited Land. So this exhibition composed of like several stories that span a rich diversity of everyday experience to rethink disability and access within the specific histories and localities of the Southwest Asian, North African region. And so these were 5 photography exhibitions and then 1 film. And we wanted to, part of the exhibition was that we really wanted to explore image descriptions and how to put, or audio description and image description into the work in a way that was still really meaningful instead of kind of being conceived as an add-on. This was a process that we worked on over a few months. Actually, Raphael and I were paired together, which I'm going to show an example from our photos. So this was one of the photographs from the exhibition. This was Moon River by Mohammed Mahdi. It's also, I can share the presentation after, and everything's available by the links too. And so this was the photograph, and then this was the image description, the final one that we ended up presenting. It was a street-long shot of a residential corner just 10 meters away from the factory. An older man, the factory was this exhibition, or this set of photographs was all around this factory, the cement factory in this village that had kind of like ended up covering it in dust, and it created a lot of health issues for residents there. It ended up becoming known as like Death Valley. No, not Death Valley. Dust Valley? Is that it? Yes, Dust Valley, because of the amount of dust that was kind of brought in because of this cement factory that opened up shop there. Anyway, a street level long shot of a residential corner just 10 meters away from the factory. An older man leans on the corner of a bare concrete apartment building that towers out of the shot. He's looking away from the camera down a narrow dirt street lined with protruding balconies. The cloudy sky is almost completely obscured by the tubes and scaffolding that hang in the background. So I'll just toggle back. And the way that we presented these in the exhibition was they came one right after another. So they became kind of integral to the artwork themselves. We wrote about our methodologies too, which is also on the website, but it ended up becoming this process. Instead of just one single person writing the image description, we collaborated as a duo and then with the artist to kind of create these dialogues of what to include, what not to include. Because I think sometimes when, at least for myself, when I began writing image descriptions for other people's work, it can be really difficult to know which details to include, how to get kind of the tone or the voice come across. Yeah. So that's kind of another context of art, of access within curatorial practice. And now I guess I'll kind of move into a section of more practical elements, or just maybe some places to start if you wanted to include accessibility in your own work. And a little quote from Sin's Invalid is that access support should be shared. It's not one person's job. Encourage people to think about what access needs they have and also what access needs they can help meet for other people. And so if you're starting a project, an event, or an exhibition, I think it's important to kind of think about access from the get-go. Obviously, this can be done in larger or smaller ways, as I think it can be difficult as well. So you can work with disabled artists and organizers, I think is a really good place to start, because they'll know and they'll be able to tell you some access ways and be able to share their knowledge. Budgeting for access is important. I think it's expensive. Like to have ASL interpreters is $120 like per session. You want to be able to pay people fairly too. Perhaps you can hire an access consultant. But if you start from the place of already having a budget for access, it becomes easier, and I think also less of a burden on the individual people to kind of keep having to follow up or work on ways and access, and like then they don't have to take it out of their own pocket too. And then considering the built environment is also important. The space that you're going to be exhibiting in, how you're going to get there. Wayfinding is important, and I think is an area of access that we don't often think about, is how do you get somewhere? It can be, especially for neurodivergent or intellectually disabled folks, or even if you just don't know the city or the place that you're going to, having very clear instructions of how to get somewhere is a really good place to start. Considering like the lighting and the sensory environment, are you going to be somewhere where there's a lot of loud noise? Is there a way that you can warn about the loud noise? It was great actually, T, I really enjoyed, I tried T's VR piece yesterday, and I thought I really appreciated that you kind of were asking me like, oh, are you sensitive to loud noises? There's going to be a drop here. If you turn here, it might be overwhelming. Like this world is more calm than the other one. And I think these are all just really just like beautiful micro moments that you can consider access. And I think it can make such a difference in making someone feel welcome and safe in the space. Access also go hand in hand with harm reduction practices as well. I think especially, I'm involved in a lot of kind of like DIY communities around like dancing and music. And it's something that I really struggle with a lot, is how like this kind of balance of access in DIY spaces that are most often inaccessible because they're on the margins. They're also usually planned by volunteers or people who don't have a lot of bandwidth, or they're not planned very far in advance at all. They're hard to be promoted too if it's a DIY or perhaps like not completely legal thing. And so honestly, if anyone has any advice, this is something I've really been thinking about a lot. But I do think harm reduction is a great way, and also no smoke machines. Chemical access is something we don't think about a lot, but the way that different scents and chemicals can really impact people's ability to be in a space. They can be really triggering of other of chronic illnesses, headaches, or just like making it uncomfortable. And then also hybridity. This exhibition, I think, did a great job with hybridity in that everything is online, and then can also be accessed later. We did a little like walkthrough of the space, so if you can't come in person, you can always access. And I think with the ongoing pandemic, this is even more important to consider, is just being out in the world can be unsafe or can be really anxiety producing for a lot of folks. And I've just listed, why is this happening? Some resources. So, because I'll share this presentation after, but AIMLab has some protocols for our event organization, as well as website accessibility. TangledArts.org, which is Tangled Arts Plus Disability, which is an organization based in Toronto, has amazing toolkits and resources for other events. The collective, also Toronto-based Crip Rave, does great. They've been doing like really important work with kind of DIY dance culture and disability. Sin's Invalid as well, which I mentioned earlier, they have a great kind of guideline for access suggestions for public events. And then also just more resources on accessibility is the Mapping Access Project, which is ran by Amy Hamray. And they have a lot of like syllabi and kind of resources that you can look at. All right, so I've chatted for quite a while. So I'm gonna get into the audio description and image description portion, which will be a little bit more like workshop-y. This is based on a workshop that I took through the AIMLab with Thomas Reed and Cheryl Green on audio description. And so audio description, from what I have kind of been, how I have been explained it to someone has explained it to me, I don't know how to say that, is audio description is kind of this umbrella for describing, is the form of narration used to provide information surrounding key visual elements in a media work for the benefit of blind or visually impaired consumers. And then under that is also image descriptions, which focus, it's like the written version. And then also alt text, which is for online photographs or online visual content. There's usually an alt text option if you're not familiar with it. But then if you write your alt text, it won't be visible on the web page, but it'll show up with a screen reader to provide context with the image. And then, so yeah, the last link, alt text is poetry. I also kind of took some stuff for this workshop, and they do amazing work at kind of how can we better address better address alt text as something creative and beautiful. So now I kind of want to get into this audio description activity. If anyone has an object that they brought or like a piece of art, they can use it. But also, if we didn't, we can all do the same piece. I brought a piece, well, I'm going to show it on the screen, and then I thought we could kind of perhaps pair off and do a brief image description and then come back and like share with each other. Georgia Kliege, who's a blind artist and scholar, they write a lot on image description and audio description art. And they say that they often learn more about the describer than the work that's being described in writing an image description, which I think is really interesting and also important to kind of consider how we bring our positionalities and how like writing an image description is never a neutral act. It's always something political, and it's coming from a specific positionality. So I don't know how clear I'm being, so let me know if I'm not, but basically I was thinking we'll show the photo, break off either into pairs or alone if you feel more comfortable, and write a brief visual description of the work that we're engaging with, and then we will come back and share them. But some things to kind of keep in mind, this is directly from Alt Text as Poetry, is first, attention to language. So simply by writing alt text or an image description with thought and care, we shift the process from something kind of boring and standard, which is often how image descriptions are conceptualized. What words are we using? What are their connotations? What is the tone of our writing? What is the voice, who the reader hears? How do these align with or contrast the tones and perspective of the image? So word economy, people who are new to description have a tendency to over-describe images. While there are times for long and lavish descriptions, alt text usually aims for brevity. For most images, 1 or 2 sentences will do, and poetry has taught us a lot about paring down language to create something that is expressive yet concise. And then the final one is experimental spirit. We have so much to learn from poetry about being more playful and exploratory in how we write alt text. We are not interested in experimentation for experimentation's sake. We want a kind of experimentation that moves towards better and more nuanced accessibility for alt text users. We center the user and accessibility is kind of the main feature. There are a lot of complex and interesting questions that come up when translating visual information into text. We need to try out different ways of doing this, learning from each other's strategies and techniques. I realize that it's confusing. I've used image description, audio description, and alt text all in kind of the same way. But for the sake of this activity and for time, why don't we try to focus on alt text? So writing 1 to 2, you can go up to 3 or 4 sentences if you wish. And so the image we can use is here on the left. This is a sculpture by the artist Judith Scott, Untitled, from 1989. So Judith Scott, who's one of my favorite artists and a big inspiration for my fiber work, they have been making art. They passed away in 2007, but they've been making art for most of their life, but were not taken seriously as an artist until their 40s because they have Down syndrome. And so they never really had the space or the audience to be creating art until they worked with the Center Creative Growth in Oakland, California, which is an artistic center that gives resources and studio space for intellectually disabled artists to kind of cultivate their practice. And so then since she came to Creative Growth, she was making these beautiful sculptures for the rest of her life. She had a retrospective at the Brooklyn Museum in 2000 something. But yeah, I wanted to kind of use the, oh, we're Wilden. What's up? Perhaps we'll have to go from memory. Who knows? Oh, we're back. Oh no. The tornado is coming inside. But yeah, I guess I'll just keep talking. But yeah, one of my favorite artists, and I kind of wanted to include them in this presentation somehow, just to draw awareness to their work. But if we don't get it back, we can also just all pick a piece in this gallery for those of us in person. Oh, we're good. Okay, cool. Okay, was I clear with, oh yeah, Hannah. You can do either. I had kind of thought of working on one together, but obviously taking your own kind of position and going with that. Yeah, people online, does that make sense if there are people online?
Do you have anyone?
Okay, cool. All right, well, let's, oh no, oh, it's not showing up. Okay, cool. Why don't we take 5 minutes, then we can like come back and share a few of them, or like the experience of writing audio description. And then if there are any other questions, I can also answer those. All right, swag. Hi, Laura. I don't care, you're here. All right, are we ready to come back? Okay, I'm excited. I'm also thought it would be kind of fun to input these into Dolly and see what the images actually come up as. Oh, that's not it. Where'd it go? How was that experience for everyone?
Challenging.
Yeah, harder than we thought it would be.
What was difficult? Yeah. But it's funny because if it's you giving that image description and that's what you thought of, you could totally, do that as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm no expert, so maybe someone will correct me. But does anyone want to read theirs out? We can see what emerges.
Okay, threads of many colors. Is that what you did too? No, that sounds so good.
Oh no.
It's kind of poetic because of rap. They have a more poetic mind than me, that's for sure. Blue, red, white, and black spun. An abstract shape.
That's at the end of the first sentence.
Yeah.
One main body with arcs rising.
Another. Do you want me to do
Oh, sorry, that's all together. An abstract shape, one main body with arcs. Sorry.
one main body with
Arcs rising. And then next line. Coming together, calling you to grasp it. What? I know, that's the poetic part.
I love it.
That was you. Actually, well. I was like, a bowl of soup.
Thread soup, my favorite. Ooh. I love it. This is also not like there's no right or wrong answer. That's what I'm trying to get at with image descriptions. Is like they're so subjective and like you're never gonna see something the exact same way as someone else does. And I think that's where the creativity and the fun really comes into them, is that you can put in a lot of care. Fun AF, exactly. Okay, anyone else?
An abstract sculpture made of multicolored thread wound around a long horizontal shape with two overlapping arches protruding upward.
Protruding. Did I spell that right? No. It's because the T is broken on my keyboard. Let's see. Ooh. Okay. It's fun. I'll save these all and send them too, so we can have the original and then the AIs. All right, anyone else want to go? Yeah, let's do it. Y'all can see my horrible typing skills. Anyone else do all the right type?
Oh, yes.
Failed it. But also, what? Orange, red, and purple. But connect and cross one another. Oh. Nice. I guess it's interesting how it's giving so many like portion shots, even though we're saying like a sculpture. Oh yeah. Yeah. Mhm. I guess do y'all want to go in the back? I know we're at time. Yeah, yeah. You can do it all. Ooh. You want to see? Let's do it. Oh.
Of course.
No. Yeah, I could. Do you want me to do body, or do you want to? Oh my God, obsessed. I love it. Yeah. Green. Yeah. Too many T's. Ooh. Huh, cool. Well, yeah, I guess we're like kind of at time, but I wanted to do this because I thought it would be fun to kind of just show the many possibilities, and yeah. And I hope you all feel inspired to write alt texts and image descriptions for your work, because I think it's something that's really easy but also really fun and can be a way for you to kind of like understand your own work more while shouting out to Access. Yeah. All right, thank you. Bye. Oh, yes, King.
It's on. Hello.
Do you want this?
Sure. I can be like an Instagram. Oh, it's over here. So that concludes the 3 days of the Digital Intimacies pop-up exhibition in the fourth space. Thank you so much for joining us over the last 3 days for various events, workshops, activities, and for engaging with our work around the room. We also wanted to thank very much Fourth Space for having us and being so awesome. Thank you to Douglas, Jax, and Anna for the planning, helping, supporting, installing, having us. And thank you also to Max and Keone, I think they may have left, and also Makai for their support in the production aspect of all this. And of course, thank you to the research creationists, researchers, artists. It's been really great coming together in this space. So lots of gratitude to extend to everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone online for joining us and everyone in person. Thank you.
And thank you, Ben.
Hello, thank you so much, so much again for joining us here for this week. It's been such a treat seeing your guys' work and hearing from you guys and having these great workshops and discussions. So we hope to see you guys here again soon. Everything is accessible on YouTube as of right now. So yeah, we hope to have you back. Thank you.